Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I'm so pleased to have a chance to greet you again on this very last day of the 27th meeting of the Wiesbaden Group on business records. And this is specifically a meeting dedicated for the Latin American and Caribbean countries. For those of you that this is your first day, my name is Arturo Blancas. I am the chair of the Wiesbaden Group, and I'm so pleased to greet all of you. In 2018, when the Wiesbaden Group proposed to us that Mexico would organize the meeting in 2020, we welcomed the idea with great pleasure, having in mind, among other things, the possibility that this meeting will be taking place with a goal that would have a special meeting for Latin America, as in other meetings of the Wiesbaden groups, there are specific meetings for some regions of the world. So from the very beginning, we wanted from the very beginning to have a specific meeting dedicated to the goal of creating coordinating mechanisms, also, of course, through ECLAC, to strengthen the business records statistical information in the countries of the region. Of course, from our point of view, they should be the basis of the processes of generating statistical information in the region. Now, this idea, and of course, ECLAC shares this idea, is to achieve that a larger number of the countries of the region will incorporate themselves to the Wiesbaden group and will be benefiting from the best practices that regarding statistical business records are shared in this Wiesbaden group. Now, during the previous months of this meeting, INEGI and ECLAC have worked hand in hand to organize this special session where we will have 7 presentations, including the one that has to do with the results of the advancement report of the 2020 report, and with the information that 18 countries of the region shared with us. Let me point out that this year we had a significant increase in the number of surveys received because previously just a few questionnaires of countries of Latin America were responded and sent to us. So let me thank all of the participants for their interest in being a part of this effort. Let me also thank ECLAC for the work done in order to reach this point, and let me thank the presenters of the previous days and those that will be giving a presentation today. Let me also welcome the representative of international bodies and also representatives of national country offices from the different parts of the world. And of course, your comments and suggestions will be very useful for us, as I've shared with you before. This session will be led by Rolando Campo. He's the head of ECLAC Statistical Office. So let me give the floor now to Rolando Campo. He will be leading the session today. So the floor is yours, Rolando. Welcome and thank you very much. Well, let me thank all of you. Good day to all of the colleagues that are with us today in this meeting of the 27th Wiesbaden Group meeting. I truly would like to thank the steering committee of this group for the support in order to add this special uh, day to review the stats and of the business records in the Latin American and Caribbean region. Let me thank INEGI and Arturo Blancas and Gerardo Duran, who have been helping us even before the pandemic will come our way in this process, and that we were invited to have this working meeting group. In one of the days where we had a statistical meeting and where Arturo Blanca was, we were talking about the last session, as we were heading to take our bus, well, we started identifying the positive things and where we should tackle and host this particular session. And this is a plan that dates back to 2019. And that is how we have reached this 27th Wiesbaden group meeting. Now, with no further ado, let me give the floor now and welcome, first of all of you. But I would like to start taking advantage of the time by making some housekeeping announcements for you. The first of them is we will ask the colleagues to not to take more than 15 minutes in your presentations. After the presentation, we will have a series of Q&A sessions in which I ask of you to put them on the chat so we will have a chance to be able to review them and respond them.
A ellas. Sin más, yo le doy la bienvenida.
With no further ado, let me welcome the first session, and it has to do with the maturity levels of the business statistical records. And this will be a presentation held by Hank Hermans.
And so, thank you for being here to present the maturity model of the statistical business register. You have 15 minutes, and over to you, Hank.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to start sharing my screen. Hopefully it works. Oops. No. Something went wrong.
Now we can see it.
Yeah, now I can see it, but now, wait, something has. It's not on the right screen on my computer, so there's something.
There's something about the business register, the Murphy law, that is always in the presentation when we want to make a presentation. Go ahead.
Yes. So yeah. So thank you very much, and I'm very honored to present here in this special session, and I believe it's for you very early in the morning. And I would also like to thank you on behalf of Mr. Saleh El Kafri. He couldn't be here today, so I will do the presentation. And we have not that much time, so I suggest to start immediately. And I don't know if everyone who is attending today was also attending yesterday's session. But for those who did attend yesterday's session, I would like to say what is different from the one I did yesterday. Today, I would like to take the opportunity to give you more in-depth information about the maturity model. And you know that it often occurs that if you look to the same object from a different view, everyone sees something different. And that is exactly what is shown in this picture of the elephant. And in finalizing the maturity model, it is important that we look at this concept from as many perspectives as possible. And that is why I think that this session is a great chance to get relevant feedback from you. So for those who didn't attend yesterday's meeting, I go very quick to the concepts of the maturity model. In the maturity model, we say there is no standard situation. But despite that fact, we wanted to work at a tool or to a tool that can be used in many situations. At the same time, we also, do you see the next slide now, or do you still see the what is different slide?
No, we see the elephant.
Oh. Now you see what is the Sbr Maturity Model. Sorry for the mess up now. So what I wanted to say is that we worked towards a tool that can be used in many situations, and at the same time we also know that there is already much knowledge available. So it would be a good thing if we can build upon that knowledge. You can think of manuals, best practices, procedures, and so on. So that is how the idea for the maturity model came out. A model that has already have a big track record, for example, in the software industry. The Sbr Maturity Model we wanted to create is a tool where you can determine the current state of your Sbr, where you can determine possible next steps for the development, where you can find help and find guidelines to actually be able to take those steps, but also a place where we can share the knowledge that we have. So we share knowledge and best practices. So what are the components of the maturity model? First, we have a manual. Let's see, yeah, sorry. First, we have the manual. And in the manual, the framework of the maturity model is explained in detail. And I'll come back to that in the next slide. The manual also describes a strategic view on statistical business registers. Besides that manual, we have developed a toolkit. And part of the toolkit is an online questionnaire with interactive features. This will also be explained a bit later. We also have prepared a list of training materials with concrete mappings to the maturity model and how that can help us. I will also like to show that in the rest of the presentation. The last component of the toolkit is the global assessment that we want to conduct every 5 years. And I won't go into detail at the global assessment, but I will explain something about it in my very last slide. Yes, basically the first step that we did as a task team was to develop a strategic view. And this view we call the dot on the horizon. And in this view, we say something about the use of an SBR, the contents of the SBR, and the structure of it. And we describe the strategic view from national and international perspective. And I would like to take this opportunity to ask you to take a closer look to that strategic view. And you can find it as a link in the paper that we uploaded at the website of the Wiesbaden group. And we call this view the dot because it can be seen as the ideal picture. And that means for some countries, it will be close to what an SBR is now. And for other countries, this dot will only contain some elements that are interesting to work at. And the idea is that for an SBR, you can look at it from a specific point of view, and we call that a dimension. A dimension, we have defined 7 of them. I will come to that later in the presentation. Next to the dimensions, we have the stages of maturity. Per stage of maturity, we exactly defined what characteristics and what requirements need to be in place. And based on the differences between each stage, we can also say what kind of measures are needed to reach the next stage of maturity for that dimension. And I saw that already the next slide was on your screen. We have 7 dimensions. The first of that is the legal and institutional framework. And the second is the data sources. And I would like to go into detail to the first dimension. And hopefully this works, because I'm clicking on my screen and I don't see.
We are seeing the slide with 7 dimensions, that has 7 dimensions.
Yes, but wait. Okay, this. I want to go to the next slide, but there's something very, and I can't seem to be able to stop sharing the screen to try it in another way. So
Now we see the next slide.
Yes, but when I click, because this is an interactive sheet where every click should be thing, and it doesn't work the way I would like to do. So this is annoying. Sorry for that.
Podríamos pasar desde control, podríamos pasar la presentación de Herman.
Sí, eso es lo que le estoy preguntando, a Gerardo.
La estamos proyectando desde Aguascalientes.
We are showing your screen from Aguascalientes. We're managing your screen. That's what everyone is seeing. We're projecting
Can I please share my own screen, because that works a bit better, I think. That's so you are. Okay, now.
Are you okay, Hank?
Yes, I am okay. So you are now projecting the screen that I see on. Okay, that is okay then.
Can you stop sharing?
Okay, what you see is the first question in the questionnaire, and the question is there a legal framework or MOU for that supports the SBR data collection? If no, the stage is preliminary. If yes, we can see if we are at a higher stage. Please click. Could you please? Yes, thank you. So, and then the next question arises, and the next question is, does it cover business registration and economic census? And then if you click again, you see if the answer is yes, you are at least at the early stage. So if you click again, we check if the next stage is also applicable. Please click. Yes, and that is the question, does it guarantee NSOs regular to access administrative data? If no, then the stage is mature. Please click next slide. Yes. And otherwise, we go to the last question. Please click again. And the last question is does it include clauses on data protection and privacy and data exchange? If no, then the stage still is mature. If it is yes, then the stage is advanced. Please click again. And then again. So what you can see is that each question, you in an incremental way, you see the stages of the legal and institutional framework. So let's do the next one, but then a bit quicker, because now we work, now we know how it works. The next one, the first question is there a source that constantly updates the SBR? If the answer is no, you are at the stage preliminary. Please click. Then if the answer is yes, you check if the following question is true. Does the SBR receive data mainly from economic census? And if the answer is yes, we only receive information from the economic census, then it is early. Then the stage is early. But if it is no, then there probably are more sources. So please click. Then the next question says, does the SBR receive sub-annual data from administrative sources? Click again. If that is the case, then the stage is at least mature. And we want to know if you also at the advanced stage. Click again, please. And then the question is the SBR capable of receiving and merging data from multiple sources? If the answer is no, then the stage stays at mature. If the answer is yes, please click. Then the stage is advanced. So also in this example, I showed you that each of the questions you can use to find out at what stage of maturity your SBR is exactly in. So let's go quickly through the other dimensions, not in this way, but just looking at it. Please click again. And again. Yes, dimension 3 is the dimension maintenance and updates of the SBR. This dimension of the maturity model focuses on the maintenance and update of the SBR, and in particular to the operational requirements of maintaining effective and reliable systems. The operational requirements of a maintenance program include the modification of records, internal reviews of the system functions, the preservation of stored records, and the maintenance of field operations. Then we go to the next dimension. Please click. It's the coverage of an SBR. And this dimension refers to the coverage of businesses included in the SBR. This can be evaluated in terms of the proportion of the economic activity represented by the units in the SBR as a share of the total economic activity in the country. The coverage of an SBR can also be viewed in terms of what sectors of the economy are included. For example, does it cover the formal and informal sector? And does it cover entities of different sizes? This dimension also refers to the coverage in terms of variables that are recorded for each entity. So the coverage of the SBR is highly dependent on the quality of coverage of the available data sources and also on the broader legal framework. And I see that you are looking at slide for the 5th dimension, that is the use of SBR. And this dimension describes the use of SBR both by external users and internal users within the NSO. And it focuses on how well the SBR meets the needs of the users and the significance of the SBR for the organization. The use of the SBR in statistical processes will probably depend on the stage of maturity of other dimensions. And confidentiality is also a key consideration in this. Please, next slide. 6th dimension is the IT environment. And this dimension includes the IT environment that supports the data storage, maintenance, update, and dissemination of SBR. And looking at the different stages, for example, in the preliminary stage, you have the companies that are covered in the SBR only at paper or an Excel sheet. And the further you go up to the advanced stage, then you get the more modern techniques like big data and web scraping and so on. Then we go to the next slide. That is the 7th dimension and the last one, interoperability. And that refers to the ability of the SBR to communicate and exchange standardized data with other registers in domestic, regional, or global level. And at a preliminary stage, for example, there is no interoperability at all. And on the advanced stage, microdata linking, such as linking between the business demography and trade by enterprise characteristics are available. And regional cross-country analysis is also possible. So that are the different stages. So let's look to the next slide, please. Because earlier I said that one of the elements is the online questionnaire, and I showed 2 questions where you can define what stage you are. The answers you give in the online tool will not be stored. I also explained that yesterday. This is only for own use. And based on the answers of each score, the scores of the dimensions can be visualized in a spider plot. And you see the spider plot over here. In this example, for example, the score is drawn in a green color. And next to the score of the self-assessment, you can also define the desired situation of the SBR. And based on the differences between the scored and the desired, the toolkit offers then help to possible measures that you can take to achieve the desired situation. Let us take, for example, the dimension of coverage. You can see that in the lower right, and that's the score is there early. Next slide, please. And if we want to move from early to the mature stage, then we want to know exactly what we need to do. And our plan is to develop a knowledge base that grows in time. And the initial filling of this knowledge base now comes from existing material. For example, from handbooks and guidelines that already exists, but also references to documented best practices like procedures and methods and dialogue frameworks, chain management and partnerships. So the idea is that if you find out that you are at a certain stage for your SBR and you want to move to the next level via the online questionnaire and spider plot, you are able to see, to find that helps you to take the steps to achieve the next level. Next slide, please. So where are we now? And this is already my last slide. We're now in testing the questionnaire. And we already found out, I also said that yesterday, that testing is a very useful step because we found some inconsistencies and we are solving that right now. And so testing leads to improvement of the questionnaire, but it definitely also leads to improvement of the model itself. And for now, on this occasion, I would like to invite you to test the current version of the maturity model so that we can improve this version before we finalize the draft version. Because I found out that we are working on this model in our task team. And we definitely are now looking to countries that are not represented in the task team, and they give us a new view on the existing thing. So it would be very nice if you can give us some input. So input from the Latin American and the Caribbean countries is very welcome. After that, we will finalize the draft version of the manual. And this manual, including the questionnaire, will be shared for a global consultation. And this global consultation will take place in the 4th quarter of this year. So I think that will be around November or December. After that, if we think that the model and questionnaire can be accepted, we want to present it at the statistical commission meeting that takes place in 2022. Like I also said, we also are planning to conduct a global assessment every 5 years. And the information that in the global assessment, where I said that the online questionnaire was only for own use, with the global assessment, we want to use the information, so the information is shared at least with the UNSD office. So we are able then to define, based on the information that we collect, where technical assistance is needed, and that would give the UN committee of experts on business and trade statistics, and especially the task teams on exhaustive business registers and the task team on the capacity building will give good insight in what assistance is needed. So I would like to invite you also to take part at the global assessment if we conduct it. And this is where I wanted to stop this presentation. I would like to thank you again for the invitation to present the maturity model in this session. And I hope I have warmed you up and make you a bit enthusiastic for this model. And hopefully we'll see your comments when we conduct the global consultation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hank, for your presentation. Sorry for the misunderstanding of the passing.
Yeah, now I get it. Why so why my slides were not responding on the screen because someone else was in charge of the slides. I'm sorry, I didn't know that because yesterday I managed to do the own presentation. So sorry for the misunderstanding from my side.
Don't worry. Now we are going to open the floor for questions and answers. So we have 10 minutes. Vamos a abrir la sesión para preguntas y respuestas.
So we'll have a 10-minute Q&A. And first of all, I'd like to know if there's anyone in the audience who has a question. I think the model was very well presented. So Hank, I do have a question for you. Has the survey been translated into Spanish? Because I'm not sure if all manuals as well are translated into Spanish so that we can share them in the region.
Oh, my mic is still on. Not at this moment. And I'm looking at Ilaria if we are planning to translate it in different languages, because I don't know if that is the policy. Now it's only available in English, but maybe that Ilaria can explain something about this. You're still muted, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Hank. And thank you, Rolando, for the question. I think it's very important to address. In general, once the publication is or the manual is finalized, will be translated in the all UN official languages. The problem a little bit at this point is that even for the global consultation of the manual, we don't have the resources to translate at the moment, because it takes a long time within the UN process to translate the document. So I know that INEGI put a lot of effort, and I thank Gerardo and all the INEGI office for a previous pilot survey that we conducted as part of the work of the Committee of Experts. They did a lot of effort to translate the technical sheets of the indicator and the survey that was carried out. But it's an incredible, it's a very intensive process. And I don't think it's feasible between now and the end of the year within the timeline to go forward. Certainly we will look for possibilities to have at least the pilot, the questionnaire, maybe to be translated, and we can talk bilaterally with colleagues, maybe if there are possibilities with ECLAC, I don't know. But for us at the moment, we don't have the resources to do it, unfortunately. But certainly once the publication is finalized, the plan is to I have the official translation. Thank you. Back to you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. We have a question from Brazil, Hank, in the chat box, but let me read it to you. In relation to administrative registers, we have been facing a situation of having regular access to these registers that feed the SBR. So we have been having problems accessing this base because it's a public administration register. So our concern is for the purpose for which the register was built, and the statistical purpose was not contemplated. And so we are left with some important gaps and lack of information. So what would be the recommendation regarding the updates for these registers, and the statistical institution is not consulted by the owner of the registry? So this is a question we have in the chat box.
Okay, thank you very much. As let me try to repeat the question in my words to see if I understand it well. You are receiving information from public registers, but it does not contain the information that you expect, or it does not fully contain the information that you expect, or maybe the information has changed even in the registers. And you are asking what would be the recommendation regarding the updates of these registers when the institution is not consulted by the owner of the registry, and then the owner is something without the NSO, outside of the NSO, I think.
Exactly.
Yes, that is a situation that we also recognized in Statistics Netherlands in the past, that things are changing without being noticed in advance. And what we try to do now is to get a seat at the table everywhere where we know that we collect information from, like for example the tax office or big ministries. We try to be in the opportunity to also discuss with them what changes are needed and what impact certain changes would have on statistics. And that is not very easy to gain access to that table, but I think it's the best way. So my advice would be now, without having all the information I need, is to invest in relationships, because you have to be in close contact with the register holders, and they need to know how important their information is for statistical offices. If they don't know what kind of importance it has, they are changing it without noticing us, and that's the last thing you want. So I can imagine this question. I can fully understand why you ask it, but the last way we also did that. I talked about the legal framework. The legal framework is also a way you can make sure that organizations are obligated to inform the statistical office before changes are being made to the most important registers. But even then, the first step is to build a close relationship.
Thank you, Hank, for your answer. And now we have another one, and I think it's going to be the last one. Gerardo Duran from Mexico, he wants to ask you something. Gerardo, go ahead.
Gracias, Rolando. Sí,
Thank you, Rolando. And thank you, Hank, once again for this interesting presentation and for accepting the invitation to be with us today. My question has to do, when we get the input and the feedback from the countries of the Latin American region, and this is in coordination with Di Mateo's department, when would be the correct moment to do it, and until when do we have time? Especially taking into account the fact that we don't have the maturity model translated into Spanish. So we do need some time to read it, to go through it, to understand it, and to give out an opinion. So I do think it would be worth it to know how much time we have available, taking into account that we don't have it in Spanish. So that's my question. I don't know who can answer, Hank or Ilaria, but thank you.
Okay.
And yes.
Thank you very much for the question. And I fully understand what you are asking. And also for us, it's very important that the Latin American and Caribbean countries can do the tests. So my proposal now is not to give you a correct answer, because what I suggest is that we first discuss this internally with the task team and with the UNSD office, and then we come back to you at very soon notice, and hopefully then you can share the information with the Latin American and Caribbean countries. So I don't want to say now a specific date, because I don't know if I can manage to make that possible. But if we are allowed to take some time to discuss this, we will come with a good answer, I hope. Is that correct, Ilaria? Also, yeah, you are nodding, so.
Yeah, if I can add, there is a tasting meeting coming up soon, and I think that we can have a closer look at the timeline and come back to you, Gerardo, and to all the participants with a more realistic time frame in which can conduct. But it's a good point, Gerardo, and we taking into consideration the fact that it cannot be a quick turnaround because of also the language barrier that we are facing with the English, the only English version at the moment. So thank you for mentioning.
Thank you very much for a very good question. I see one hand raised, Rolando, from Eduardo.
The last question to Eduardo Larraguibel from the INE of Chile. Eduardo, por favor, haz tu pregunta. Te pediría que fuera breve.
Yes, Eduardo, please be brief in your question. Thank you, Rolando. I was thinking about possible requirements that could come into conflict. For example, in some countries like Chile, where we have a prior stage to other characteristics that we comply with, for example, access to the administrative register in a sub-annual way. So that's my question.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the question correctly. But what I heard is that you have conflicting characteristics.
Yeah, for example, in dimension 1 and 2,
yeah,
you put economic census and first, then sub-annual administrative data. So, for example, here in Chile and other countries, we don't have economic census, but we do have.
Now I understand. Yeah. So you say what I did show in my presentation, where the question was, if you have an economic census or only an economic census, then you are at that stage. But if you have more information, then you are at the further stage. Well, this is a very good thing that you are noticing now, because I think exactly what you are saying is something that we should change in the current model, because I agree with you that the question is not if you use an economic census or other, because we are also not using an economic census, but we use other sources. So if that is conflicting in the manual and if that is conflicting in the questions, then that is an error in the manual. So we have to correct it. And I would like to thank you for your sharpness that you found it. We have to check that, because that is not correct. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Hank. Thank you very much, Hank, and thank you very much, Hilaria. I'm sorry not to mention you at the beginning of the session.
That was my fault.
Thank you very much for your time, Hank. Have a nice weekend in the Netherlands, and so we are going to continue with the presentations and with the session 2. Vamos a presentar sobre, y me toca a mí.
I will be presenting session 2, so I'll introduce myself. My presentation will be, question. Who will share my presentation? As you wish, Rolando. It can be us or you. Maybe you should share it so that I don't have to get distracted. Okay, great. We'll share it for you. Great, thank you. So the presentation for session number 2 is the current situation of the SBRs in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. I'd like to thank my colleague from Economic Statistics, Ana Victoria Vega, for her support and her team's support, the unit of Economic Statistics from the office, and I'd like to thank them for sharing information so that I can do this presentation. So this is the content of the presentation. We'll start with some background, the situation of the SBR in Latin America, a timeline, the characteristics, the activities during 2020, future plans, main challenges, and opportunities in a COVID-19 scenario. So let's start with the background. The survey carried out on the Wiesbaden's report requested on the countries in order to have an update on the use and implementation of SBRs in the countries. At the beginning of the week, Arturo Blancas presented the report on the situation of the countries around the world. And now we will do a specific approach for Latin American and Caribbean countries that are in blue here on the slide. As chair of the group, INEGI supported all Latin American and Caribbean countries and sent all information. We received response from 18 countries, 4 countries from the Caribbean, and 14 from the Latin American continent. The survey was drafted by the Statistics Regional Office, and we only accepted answer per country. Here are the countries that participated: Panama, St. Lucia, Suriname, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Bolivia, Paraguay, and El Salvador. Once we gathered the information, we're able to analyze it. And here we can see a timeline. We have a long-lasting tradition in the region that dates from 1960, where we have identified the first statistical business register in El Salvador. After that, Panama started in 1991, Brazil in 1996. Between 1996 and 2000, Peru and Chile. 2005, we had Costa Rica, St. Lucia in 2008, Dominican Republic in 2009, all the way to 2018. And over the last 2 years, we had Guatemala, Colombia, Suriname, and Belize. Next slide. We also had a presentation to see if there was a re-engineering, a restructuring of these registers. And so we tried to see if there was an update and if there was a modification that could add more information. We do see that several countries carried out this restructuring and they managed to improve their register. The countries of the region that answered this survey, most of them affirmed that they started using statistical business registers in their framework. 18 countries carried out this test. 8 countries said that they use it for economic statistics, others to give updates to their directories, and others to characterize and differentiate the different types of companies. But all of them did a sampling frame. This slide shows the staff that is allocated from the countries to follow up on these registers. 10 countries allocate 1 to 5 colleagues, 3 countries from 6 to 10, 3 countries from 11 to 20, and only 2 countries allocate over 20 people as staff. So Mexico and Chile are the 2 countries that ask over 20 employees to follow up on this process. Now, what are the characteristics of the information? From the answers we got, we see that they refer to the different levels of statistics that we could identify. And for each observation, we recorded the number of units that could be identified in the register. 30% of the countries responded that 30% of the registers came from companies, 16% from local unities, 21% from establishments, 7% said that they had local units per type of activity. So this is the information characteristic that we have from all 18 countries and how they separated it according to the information. Now, on this slide, what we want to represent is that we see that over 90% of the countries from the region said that they had coverage over different models. So over 90% of the countries mentioned that they do have this type of coverage. The Financial coverage reaches up to 95%, and the largest coverage countries have to do with with financial activities. As you can see, it's also very low when it comes to households. Countries that have less coverage, we have here several countries that mention that they only reach 40% of coverage in financial and non-financial activities, even below 30%. And for those who have no coverage, it's important to mention that all of this came from households registers mostly. So what are the information characteristics in the update? How can we update the information? As Eduardo mentioned from Chile, this is tricky, and 35% mentioned that most of their information came from economic census. 42% of the countries said that they use administrative data. 16% said that they use statistical registers, and the rest from another type of activity. It's important here to state that the two main areas are economic census, or rather administrative data shared with them. Regarding the availability of geographic coverage, we see that 40% of the countries answered that they can georeference their information, and so they can identify the units where they are located. So only 40% of the countries can identify this process. The rest of the countries do not have georeferences. Now, in the activities reported by the countries during the year 2020, 94% of the countries have carried out activities during 2020. When it comes to information sources, they identified everything that has to do with entrepreneurial demographics or business demographic, which is information by gender, access to planning, to administrative registers, planning, coordinating, and carrying out activities that are updated, and also the new implementation of REN. 23% of the countries answered that they also carried out maintenance activities, for example, visits to the office, codification, and 13% said that they carried out activities regarding national statistical registers, for example, reformulating the national statistic registers. Let's look at the future plans. 88% of the countries that answered the survey mentioned that they have an activity that is being planned for the future. Especially when it comes to information source, they want to renew, exchange information agreements, update databases. Other activities are developing new indicators, elaborating the register for economic statistic, draft COVID-19 surveys to see how the pandemic impacted them, and also including geospatial information on the location of each company. And when it comes to coverage, the objective is to improve the quality of data, to strengthen the administrative registers of institutions, including how to include informal activities and how to measure the strength of local units.
desafíos que se
Now,
están
what are the main challenges that we're facing, and
Which are the main challenges that
what did
we are
they answer?
facing? And what is it we have received as an answer? The most important thing is how to update a directory through direct presential visits. This is something that we can already do in regards to activities like this. This was highly limited in 2020, though many countries were able to do it. Yet the lack of staff, we were able to identify the limited staff that some statistical offices have assigned for follow-up of these processes. And perhaps we have other type of economic and statistical information to establish interoperability systems with the information sources to directly exchange the information, and also funding in order to carry out these processes. This is a process that calls for economic resources. Also, to build up an updated system to manage the statistical records, the SBRs. Also, to consolidate the legal frameworks of the administrative records. Also, this has to do with what was expressed by our friend from Brazil, and what was also expressed by our Chilean colleague, of how can we build these legal frameworks in order to generate a better administrative record, and how we can have all of the statistical offices to be a part of these different SBRs with the different chambers of commerce, trading offices, etc. Also, the integration of business interinstitutional uh, tramiting processes, the consolidation of the legal frameworks of the economic statistical system. Which are the opportunities within the COVID scenario? Well, the idea is that to apply these cross-cutting surveys for these companies in order to measure COVID impact, to reconsider the operational methodology of these administrative records, and to provide them with a priority. And these business records are nothing else but one additional administrative record to continue with the application of the COVID-19 questionnaire in the process of updating of the mercantile records, considering some improvements with the experiences obtained the previous year. Now, with this, I will conclude my participation. I thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I certainly open up the floor for any questions or comments with the support of all of my colleagues who are with me today. We don't have any questions at this point.
No, no veo ninguna.
No, I don't see any questions right now. Well, if there are no hands up, that means that I had an excellent presentation. So I thank you so much for your time. And this has allowed us to be fully updated. Well, if there are no more questions, let me go now. Let me thank INEGI Panama for your comment. I will go to the next session, and it has to do with the projects developed in Latin America and the Caribbean in the field of statistical business registers. And for this purpose, I would like to share with you some lessons learned in the statistical register system for the statistical exploitation of administrative data of an NSOs, and a project that we're coordinating with ECLAC, with the cooperation of Bolivia, Colombia, Chile, Peru. And for this, I will give the floor to Eduardo Larraguibel. He's the head of the project of Economic National Institute of the Statistical Office in Chile, and also Jose Luis Huertas, from he's executive director of INE Peru. and they will be guiding this presentation. We have 15 minutes for your presentation. The floor is yours. Eduardo.
Muchas gracias, Rolando. Voy a
I thank you, Rolando.
ceder la palabra a José Luis.
I will start and then I will give the floor to Jose Luis.
¿Vas a presentar algo,
Entiendo,
Eduardo?
entiendo que hoy están
To- to-
las diapositivas.
To my understanding, you're helping us with the slides.
Nos pueden verificar que podemos subir la presentación.
Aguascalientes, can we upload the presentation?
Perfecto.
Thank you very much. We have it on.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, como les comentaba, Rolando,
Well, as Rolando was sharing with you,
lecciones aprendidas
these has to do with the lessons learned
proyecto
regarding the project of the SBRs for the exploitation of administrative data within the statistical offices of Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, and Chile.
sobre los registros estadísticos de empresas de la región. Y me está acompañando José Luis Huertas del
I have
Instituto Nacional de
Jose Luis
Estadística,
Huertas
Perú.
from the Statistical National Institute from Peru.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Bueno, los temas de la presentación.
The topics of my presentation. First, we will introduce the project and the context of the development it has. Then we'll go into a brief diagnosis of the SBR in INE Chile, then the lessons learned and the challenges here also at INE Chile, and then a diagnosis that will be presented by what Jose Luis will be sharing with you in Peru, and the lessons learned and challenges identified in Peru.
Bueno, el proyecto Sistema de Registro
Now,
Estadístico
the SBR project,
base al modelo
based on this model,
propósito de conformar un sistema
my
integrado
idea within having an integrated SBR
oficinas
record
estadísticas
system with 4 statistical offices, Colombia, Peru, Chile, and Bolivia, that are working intensively in the conceptualization of the statistical base of records and their interrelation, and as the management of administrative registries within taking advantage of this statistical information. For the implementation of the project, it has been critical, the support given to us by ECLAC and the Presidential Agency for Cooperation from Colombia, APC. Now, this project started in 2019 with an expected time of 3 years. And with these, we wanted to be interacting with government officials of 4 different offices in order to strengthen the statistical capacities, our experiences, and all of the elements that will be promoting our actions here.
La planificación general del proyecto tiene 6 resultados a partir del plan operativo anual.
We have obtained 6 outcomes of the yearly project. We have developed the probabilistic and conceptual framework for the 4 statistical offices. And this is something I will be referring to you later on. We had the development of a vendor system and the management of the vendors, also the development for the conceptual framework of implementation, the different management system of the SBRs, and the indicators of the ODS or SDGs, I'm sorry, as an indicator to reduce the production costs. This is a methodological framework that is common for the 4 countries. Finally, the construction of an indicator of what is linked with the SDGs and the statistical information of the 4 different offices involved. In regards to the consulting or advisory activity, we have a conceptual framework, methodological for the SBRs conducted with Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. We is integrated by the following stages. We have a diagnosis of the SBRs of each of the statistical offices, then the development of a conceptual and methodological framework of the SBRs in each of the INES or statistical offices. Then we have the harmonized proposal of the statistical units, and then the development of an adaptation by the different advisory committees. Then a proposal of aligning the concepts within all of the statistical offices and its variables. And then finally, a program of methodological capacities implementation to take advantage of SBRs. Here, the consultant was always requesting information from the different statistical offices in order to develop all the SBRs in the way that we are doing it in coordination. Then the development of base indicators for the measurement of the quality of the statistical business records. And then we have different processes that were determined in the model proposal, GSBM by the consulting entity. And finally, a workshop to present the main outcomes of the 4 statistical offices, trying to have a broader perception of all of this process. Now, in regards to the diagnosis of the SBRs, in the case of INE Chile, we currently are coordinating a framework of the companies that uses the information of the tax offices and other vendors of administrative records, and those that come from the statistical operations of the INE in Chile. In parallel to this, we're working the design of economic units, SBRs, to replace the MME, which was the master framework of companies. Now, the use of this MME is what is referring to the different companies of the business, and these are specific government institutions that will allow us to respond to the requests of different users in accordance to the current legal context in place. Part of the lessons learned in this advisory process, we have incorporated and reinforced elements in the development of SBRs. Basically, we have this adaptation of the MG PE process, GSBPM in English, it's its acronym, for building up and the maintenance of the future SBRs. And also we have worked in identifying the main improvement areas for the management and maintenance of the SBRs. We also have different areas and maintenance and improvement opportunities. And we have also moved forward in the implementation plan of the model of statistical units, including companies and establishments and or other local units. And finally, as part of the challenges, can we show the next slide, please? Thank you. As part of the INE Chile, they have to do with improving the access to the nominated SBRs, also to continue construction and consolidation of an integrated system of SBRs, to draft a technical standard for developing maintenance and updating of the SBRs, to design and implement a program and a standardization of all the definitions, constants, variables that are relevant for the SBR, and to finally draft and carry out a program of human resource training and skills development. Well, This is what I had to share with you on behalf of INE Chile. Let me now give the floor to my colleague from Peru. I thank you, Eduardo. Good day to you. I'm Jose Luis Huertas Chumbes from INE Peru. Let me appreciate being invited by the Wiesbaden Group and INEGI Mexico and ECLAC Statistical Office. I will share with you the diagnosis of the current status of the business in Peru since the 90s. Peru had a business records, and in 2010, with signing an agreement with the tax offices in Peru, it allowed us to start consolidating the records of the SBRs. We get all the tax registry where we have everyone registered there. So we elaborated a central control of the businesses where we are registering the different companies here and that are updated every day by SUNAT. Then we also have a central directory with the different statistical offices and administrative records that are managed by institutions that integrate the statistical national system in Peru. It is really very important because as a result of this, this has allowed us to update and the legal frameworks of the sample. And it is also allowing us to collect the census information for the next economic census that we will have in the year 2026. Also, we know of the business records that is allowing us to disseminate information to different quarterly publications where we share to the different users the creation and implementation of different businesses and establishments. Also to obtain information in regards to the business structure at the geographic, national, and regional perspective, and by the size of the company, economic activity, and also the geographic location. Now, the lessons learned by INE Peru regarding this project is very important because this has allowed us to review and take advantage of the diagnosis of the SBRs in Peru. As a result of this, also INEGI has been drafting indicators regarding the business activity, and we're considering to incorporate the quality indicators that have been developed by the consulting area of the project with the intention of understanding and managing the quality of the processes and also the statistical products. On the other hand, the information that this SBRs contains is very relevant for the users in our country, given the fact that we have users from the public sector and also from the different ministries, such as the Ministry of Economic, the Central Reserve Bank, and other private institutions of the National Society of Industries, the Chambers of Commerce, and then we can take decisions regarding the different decisions regarding the management of and administration of the companies. Also within the coordination that we have within the different elements in coordinating with the tax collection system, we have had an agreement like the one that we signed in 2010, and it's a permanent basis. And finally, and recently, we have signed also an agreement with the Ministry of Labor in order to have important records regarding number of employees. As a result of this, Peru's experience, and that dates back to the 90s, and it has strengthened up to 2010 for the SBRs, and we have systemized the entry of data. And basically, it comes from our main records at SUNAT, which is the tax records. Then we have a central directory of companies that is a part of SUNAT with all the constant updates and the new companies, and where we have, for example, a consulting database with administrative records, census, surveys, with the review of these database in order to be checked by the Executive Office of Census and SBRs, and this is disseminated to different users. We are currently at a geo-reference process now. Challenges that we have identified in Peru, well, we are dedicated to continue improving the quality in regards to the allocation of the economic activity. The main development where they have different goals, as it is, for example, the tax collection purpose. Well, when a company in Peru is registered in the tax office, it is like a self tax declaration. And when the economic activity is not well specified along this sense, we are coordinating through SUNAT in order to have joint cooperations and to allow us to have a better management of the economic activity that is identified through the different activities. The idea is to have information from Peru in regards of which is the merchandise that I'm buying, what I'm selling, and with this we can have a better allocation of the economic activity. On the other hand, also, we have administrative processes to improve the management based on the quality control, and also we have a geo-referenced business records, and also to improve the inventory system and the data registries of the different statistical business records. Next slide, please. Another challenge that we face is a technical specific for the implementation of the structure, organic infrastructure within INE Peru. And of course, we have to do with the institutional issue considering budget and human resources. We also should have the right support and infrastructure that will allow us to process all of this information and provide them the right time response to the users of the different areas, and also to extend the national statistical element in order to avoid duplicating our requirements of all our administrative registers. On the other hand, we have a challenge that has been present in all of the other presentations that we have had here, is expanding the legal framework for the production of the SBRs in Peru. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, we thank Jose Luis, we thank Eduardo. We will go to the next presentation, and then we will open up to the Q&A sessions. Let me now give the floor to Hugo Hernandez. He's the Director of Design, Processing, and Analysis of the SBRs of INEGI Mexico, and Monica Ortiz. She's the coordinator of the internal working group and the statistical director of DANI Colombia. So they will be sharing with us the methodological document on economic administrative registers. So I wonder who will be starting. I will be starting. Thank you very much, Rolando. Good day to all of you. I thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to share this joint work that we have been doing within the countries of the region. The goal is to be able to share a methodological document to take advantage of the SBRs, focused in those that are of economic nature. Next slide, please. Well, within my presentation, we will go briefly through the goal of the document or the background of the document, also how we carried out this working organization within the different countries, methodological bases that are supporting the work that we've done, good practices that we identified within the countries of the region, and within the following sections, I will give the floor to my colleague Hugo Hernandez of INEGI Mexico to share with you the SBRs and the recommendations for each of the phases of the SBPM and the final conclusions of this document. Next slide, please. Next. Well, the relevance of the SBRs is really important in generating statistical information throughout the world because it's an alternative complementary source for the production of the traditional operations such as census and surveys. Nevertheless, this fact implies several challenges, basically for the Latin American and Caribbean countries, and here lies the relevance of this document with the recommendation for the statistical and records that will have standardized and harmonized criteria for the statistical production within the region. Next slide, please. Next. In the world, as we were sharing with you at the beginning, well, we have focused in the use and efforts in taking advantage of the administrative records with statistical purposes in comparison with the most developed countries of the world that have a solid statistical infrastructure that allows a mass updating of all of the statistical information through the administrative records. The case of Latin America is different. There are yet different uh, challenges that are preventing them from acting as the most developed countries. And of course, we basically have different challenges such as the legal issues in which the standards are not yet ready for the statistical offices to take advantage of the SBRs that are assigned to them. The standardization and the identification of units through their identifying codes. And on the other hand, we have a relevant challenge that is aligned with the diagnosis that Rolando was sharing with us a moment ago that has to do with the working teams, human resources, and the economic capacities of the different countries. Next slide, please. Well, in order to carry out this document that is integrated by 11 chapters, we have split this into two teams coordinated by Mexico and Colombia. The team number one was integrated and coordinated by Mexico and includes Chile, Cuba, Costa Rica, and Panama. And the team number two, coordinated by Colombia, is integrated by Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, and the Dominican Republic. Now, the work that we have been doing in recent months has enabled us to have exchanged the different information among the working teams, and it has allowed us to guarantee the consistency of the document, and in addition to share the best practices and experiences that we have in different countries of the region in order to take advantage of the business records of economic nature. Now, given these good best practices, we have the added value that this document has incorporated by the different countries in the region. Next slide, please. Well, as I have mentioned, the document is integrated by 11 chapters. The first one is based on the relevance of administrative records for taking advantage of administrative and statistical information in the region. The second one is a vision of the SBRs as a key asset for the integration of the statistical business records, where we articulate these SBRs for the integration of an SBR that would respond to different roles in such as being in a live register. From the third to the 10th element, we develop the recommendations and guidelines in order to achieve these goals through the 8 phases of the SBPM, and the 11th chapter is based on conclusions and recommendations. Next slide, please. The methodological foundation for these documents. First, it is based on the register-based system, and this has to do with the 4 pillars for the integration of the SBR statistical information. And this was created by Walgreen and Braid Walgreen, and this has the SBRs of the population records, and basically this document is centering in how to approach this statistical system of records to achieve the SBR. Along this line, we follow these guidelines of UNICE in regards to the integration of the statistical business registers as part of the generation of economic statistical information, where we have more than one role that is not only a part of the integration of a framework, but in producing statistical information directly. Next slide, please. Now this document is based on the generic model GSBPM of UNESE. Now it is a non-linear work that allows us to harmonize all of the statistical process as a result of this harmonized framework. And finally, we incorporate the experience of the countries. Experience. Next slide, please.
De estas buenas prácticas. En primer lugar,
So here's a list of the
podemos listar las
Here's a
actividades.
list of the best practices that we have seen. And first of all, we have Costa Rica. A good practice that they do for the needs specification during the phase 1. That's how they do it. Cuba also has a best practice. One of the best things they do, facing one of the challenges they need to do, is how to make the statistic office participate in the organization of the public registry system. And Chile has been able to keep updated the administrative register inventory. And also Chile's experience in the process of designing an efficient system to integrate the use of the administrative registers. We also have Peru, and as Jose Luis just explained it in the previous presentation, they have the establishment and companies central directory that is seen as a main source of information. Brazil has also adopted the GSBPM model, and we also have Argentina. I know I'm over time, but I'll give the floor now to my colleague. Thank you so much, Monica, and good morning, everyone. The vision we have for the document that is still waiting for approval from ECLAC on November is linked to this platform. We have the business statistic register that should be fed by economic statistic registers and by the internal offices of statistics. So wherever they carry out economic census, where there could be surveys, phone surveys, online surveys, etc. From this statistical business register, we get, and the combination of the economic registers as well, that we use for the updating. And so the main idea is to have associative graphs between both components in order to create new economic statistics. Moreover, these SBR are being done by the National Statistics Office. So keeping this in mind, we have several objectives. The first one is to issue recommendations within the context of all Latin American and Caribbean countries aimed to the consolidation of the statistical business register. That way it can be one of the main source of information. That way we can create a common framework and having the connection as well. So through the administrative registers, we can update and edit and we can use the information for validation of the program or any projects carried out by the National Office Statistic Bureau. As Monica mentioned, the document has recommendations for all stages of the GSBM model, going from needs specification. Here, it's important to highlight the importance of understanding the needs of all statistical offices. We also have recommendations for stage 2, which has to do with design and has to do with standardizing concepts, methodologies, and definitions. And an important recommendation that I know it's not easy to follow is the idea of the National Statistics Office to foster the use of a single identifier for the economic unit, and it should also be public. Having this unique identifier will help us a lot to update and maintain the statistical business register. For phase 3, which is construction, there are also recommendations issued that have to do with IT infrastructure and how important it is to foster the SBR and different components. For the recollection part, the recommendation highlights the role that all national offices need to have as promoters and agents of change for these legal frameworks that will allow us to share information for statistics purpose in our national offices. So we are issuing recommendations from the stage of collecting data and feed into it. In stage of processing, the recommendation we issued is to carry out the assessment of quality of the economic administrative registers. Some countries are already using certain tools. In the case of Mexico, we use the tool ECRA that allows us to assess and give feedback. They're also responsible of improving the data quality. For stage 6 analyses, the recommendations issued had to do with the micro data testing and basic dimensions so that this processing is aligned with the objectives of the economic and administrative statistical registers. Stage 7, dissemination, that has to do with disseminating the information. And stage 8, assessment, we do have some important recommendations issued that have to do with using tools to collect data. Interview, how should a assessment team should focus on, and what are the characteristics of the different dimensions, including some dimensions. As a conclusion, the document shows that the region of Latin America and the Caribbean face similar problems, and so the idea is to use the best international practices, which is the consideration and collaboration of this statistical business register, and this document that shares recommendations in order to find alternatives that will allow us to harness all of the potential of the SBR. All of this is, you can find it in line. We also have the Wallgren identifications of the registry, where we focus only on the economic part. Having this vision of the statistical business register is important to follow this direction. I know it won't be done over day, but it's important to take steps towards that direction. It's important to know that we're walking towards best practices, and each country, according to their possibilities and resources, will be able to apply these recommendations. We understand that there are different levels of development regarding statistics in the countries of the region. One of the most important recommendations that I must repeat is the use of a unique identifier for economic unities that exist in the SBR and that are used by the owners of the registers. Assessing these registers is also very important in order to improve the quality of the inputs to the system. And finally, I would like to thank all the countries that participated in developing this document. We recognize their effort. We are grateful for them, and hopefully this will be useful for all countries. Thank you so much, Hugo, and thank you, Monica, for the presentation. We have listened and seen two very interesting exercises that are being carried out in Latin America, and one under the framework of the Americas Statistics Congress that will be carried out at the end of November. And second, a very accurate exercise carried out by 4 countries of South America with a collaboration of the Colombian Economic Agency and their funds coordinated by ECLAC. So the floor is now open for questions. We will have our Q&A session. So please feel free to raise your hand if you want to take the microphone. Well, I do have a question for the colleagues of the project carried out by the Cooperation Agency. And my question is if you could tell us a bit more about the process and when do you think you'll be ready to launch this platform actively in your countries? So my question is for Eduardo and José Luis.
Rolando.
Eduardo, go ahead. Yes, thank you. So this specific work we did was specific for the methodological framework. However, the project does entail the implementation of a supplier system, and I believe it will be ready next year. Great, thank you so much. So on 2022, we'll see the process roll out. Great, thank you so much. Any other question from the audience? Yes, Arturo, go ahead. Thank you. I have a question for Monica and Hugo. And perhaps, Rolando, you can also answer it. And my question is, what is the roadmap regarding this interesting document you presented? Hugo mentioned that it will be presented in the next meeting, but what comes after that? What do we still have to do? I think this is a crucial document in order to improve the SBRs in all the region. Thank you so much. So Monica or Hugo, would you like to take the floor? Yes, I can go first. And indeed, the idea is to present it in November during the SEA, before presenting it, we did send it out to the countries of the region, not only to the countries that contributed to drafting this country. And the final date is October 15th to send all of the comments. We also drafted an executive summary that will be translated into English. And everything will be submitted on October 15th. And ECLAC will need to consider it. So here I'd like Rolando and Ana Victoria, or even Claudio Morris, to tell us about the next steps. Claudio, can you take this question? Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. So now we'll have the meeting of SEA in November, and the executive committee has to approve the document. Once it's formally approved, the document will go through the formal translation, and we'll hand out the Spanish version. Once this is done, we'll do the translation into English if it's possible. So those are the steps. I have nothing else to add, Rolando. Thank you. Thank you so much. Indeed, this document issued by one of the 11 working groups have been working for 2 years from 2019 to 2021 to present this document filled with recommendations. Now this project is over. It's now submitted to the executive committee, and a very reduced version will be approved. We are doing a follow-up of all 11 documents that will be put under consideration week after week to ECLAC. All of this in the SAA framework. And at that meeting is where we will present the projects in a shorter version. So once they have been approved, we will go to printing, both in Spanish and English, and that will stay in the repertory of ECLAC and the meeting. I see another hand raised. Yes, Hilaria Di Matteo. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rolando. And I want to congratulate to all of you for these initiatives, working together to improve the statistical business register. I think it's a very nice way to advance in a harmonized and consistent way within the region. And I was happy to hear that the document will be translated in English, because it will be also very useful for the other region, the other part of the world, to learn from your experience and your recommendations. So I was very happy. I was going to ask you if there was going to be an English version, but I'm happy that you have already contemplated this version. So thank you and congratulations to all of you and to ECLAC for facilitating this project.
Thank you. Thank you, Hilaria. So as we have our colleagues from the Caribbean, which are members of the statistical of ECLAC, so we have to translate them mostly in English. We wanted to translate it to Portuguese too, but we are going to see if it's possible because of the resources that we have. So thank you. No veo más preguntas.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, and we are at the exact time for our break. We have a 15-minute break right now from 8:50 to 9:05. I'd like to thank the 4 presenters, Hank, Eduardo, José Luis Huerta, Hugo, Mónica Ortiz. Thank you to all of you for these great presentations. I'd like to thank you once again on behalf of the Wiesbaden group and also from ECLAC for your great participation. Let's take our 15-minute break. We will resume at 9:05, so just go get a quick cup of coffee and please come back for our next session. So we'll see you back in 14 minutes. Thank you.
Muy buenos días. Continuamos con
We shall now continue with our session. If you agree, we are all back here. So let's start again. I hope we are all back. Wilson Rodriguez, do we have Wilson Rodriguez? Yes, sir, I'm here. Very good. Okay, we shall start with session 4 that has to do with regional practices regarding SBRs. We will be listening to 3 presentations. One will be led by INEC, Costa Rica. The other one with the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. And a third presentation from EBGE Brazil. Each of our speakers will be given 15 minutes, so we will keep the right time for the closing comments. So, Wilson, I know you have a presentation regarding the SBRs. You have 15 minutes, Mr. Rodriguez. The floor is yours. I thank you. Our colleagues from INEGI will be sharing the presentation while this takes place. I would like to say to those participants, we have sent you an English version of the presentation, so I hope you can follow us. Let me also thank the Wiesbaden INAGE for inviting me to be a part of this meeting and the opportunity to be a part of the speakers and share the Costa Rican experience. And let me also thank my colleague from INEC, Ms. Bravo and Ms. Cordero, that will be helping me to respond to the different questions. We have already the presentation on the screen. Let me talk to you about the Directory of Enterprises and Establishments, DEE, given its acronym in Spanish. Now, what is the DEE, the SBR in Costa Rica? This is a dedicated register of all the companies or private companies, their establishments and variables within the country where we locate them, size, and economic activity. It is critical to draft our economic statistical information to follow the dynamic of the companies, and also such as birth, process, and death and closure, such as the economic size and also the detailed sizes of the companies. This project started in 2018 with the Social Security Registry, where we made different field works regarding the largest coverage of SBRs. And we included this database. Now, the update is done on a yearly process. There are 2 ways of updating. The database is the first one, but the first is through telephone calls, and it also by calling those companies that have the latest update. And also we follow the SBRs, and they're more optimized and updated for our purposes. Some of the limitations that we have come across in our daily work have to do with the business dynamism that has to do with micro establishment sector and the absence of those companies that we're not considering. And of course, we don't have the public sector, and we have had the absence of some traditional elements that will allow us to have an analysis regarding sales, income, and businesses production. These has to do with some of the matrices, for example, such as the UNICI, and we have to detail this information furthermore. As I was saying, the administrative sources is the most relevant one for achieving this information. I think that these sources are moving forward. I will not go into detail regarding what an administrative record is all about, but it is very important for all of the SBRs to carry out a transformation process that will allow us to use this information for all of the countries. Now, the structure of the SBRs, or DEE, as we call them in Costa Rica, well, we go from left to right, where we can see the unique companies. We can find companies that have secondary activities or a series of companies that would have different establishments. And we can also find groups of enterprises with either unique or secondary companies or establishments in other geographic locations. What is important here is to identify that for all of these business units, we will have an indicator within our directory and the information available. As I was sharing with you, we can establish the different variables. We can characterize the companies at the level of the main companies, secondary activities, and establishments. As I was sharing with you, we have identification, location, economic unit, and some other variables that we have identified for this purpose, such as identification, different activities of exporters and importers and exporters, and the number of workers. Why it has been very important to have this SBRs? Well, to understand the business dynamics, in order to understand the economic structure of the country, to have a sample framework by conducting all these surveys to the business sector, and to connect this with statistical records. And we will share with you an example further within this presentation. Now, well, in this linking exercise, what we've done is we carried out a test of connecting the SBR with the database of foreign trade. This is foreign trade is divided in two lines, imports and exports. So therefore, we can do it in both cases. The benefits of these exercises allow us to identify the burden of the answers regarding the formats, to characterize those businesses and enterprises that are exporting and importing. It allows us to increase the coverage of the SBR or DEE in Costa Rica and improve quality in both data sources. Next slide. The methodology consisted in the links through the identification number, the ID number for individuals, and also we have ID numbers for legal entities or businesses. Now, this is supported with the information regarding the basic activities of the companies, such as the main enterprises with secondary activities and establishments. The foreign trade register, the purpose is to measure the entry or exits of goods. So what we have is customs declarations, and the only thing that we can do is to review the identification number. And we know that in the foreign trade, we do not take into account those elements that have to do with extraterritorial entities. Some of the difficulties that we have come across, well, the directory has to do with enterprises and establishments, some that are working with foreign trade. We do not know what sort of an activity we're studying. So then the reason of ETRE, of the foreign trade, is to measure the management of goods. We can find in this database of the directory those companies that are importing or exporting, but nevertheless, they are registered in the business records. So what do we do in a case like this? Well, we get in contact with the companies, right, to find out if they started exporting recently, or, well, given, for example, their customs declarations, and perhaps they're only managing the cargo, but they're not the end users of it. So we find out if they are going to be part of this. Now, this has been related with the economic activity of the company, and later on, we're going to see some very interesting examples. And finally, we can identify that perhaps the company is not a part of the directory, yet it is active in the base of exports and imports. For cases like this, we have to carry out a measurement to know if they previously were registered or if they were a part of the SBR or simply they were not previously registered in the SBRs. So we check this information. Here within this results, we can see that these are tables that perhaps are not nice, but nevertheless, let me center in the line that says type of an unknown business. Well, the issue here is that this number of companies that is unknown will be reduced. We know that there are some atypical information given the pandemic, but nevertheless, we center in identifying the companies, and then we could match the number of companies and also the unknown figure. Now, the exporting companies in the upper area are examples where the economic activity coincides with the exported good. For example, the company business records provide us the economic activity in a manufacturing system. We have at that level if they are doing any particular work. Now they're actually exporting devices regarding medicine, surgery, and veterinary medical equipment. Now, what happens in those cases where we have the three elements when the economic activity has all these interaction with the products that are being exported? For example, let's say that a company will be exporting light bulbs, or for example, roots or different roots and different beats actually here. So for example, a teaching company that will be sharing with us all the basic elements. If we go into the database, we can see that all of these elements that are dedicated to private teaching regarding the conservation of natural resources. Now, everything does make sense. And finally, my last example are those companies that are involved in the entertainment and recreational activities. And well, here we're going to see in greater details what they're doing. So with this, we can validate the information that we are getting. Now, the characterization that we can carry out of this exercise, for example, at the level of companies, well, we can have the level of products and destination, the participation in exports and imports, the total value of exports and imports, and the frequency of these exports. And at the level of products, we can also see the level of concentration of the exporters and importers of the main companies, destinies, origin, in accordance to the customs value, and the value of the exports and imports, and the total category of the size of the companies and the age of the companies. Next slide, please. Now, which would be the current situation of the statistical business records? We are now having a project to create a record of economic units. Now, the reason for this project at the institutional level, well, we identified the need to having a statistical record of economic units at the advanced level, well based on administrative records. And also the OECD has given us a recommendation that allowed us to overcome the limitation that was obvious in the evaluation conducted by the OECD in regards to the use of administrative records and the absence of statistical records of economic units that will implement the use and the naming of the normalized activities among the different institutions. Next slide, please. Now, the goal, what are we pursuing to do, is that we will include in this project the business records of economic units with the statistical units of economic units by sector and the administrative records that would have to do with foreign trade, for example, and that we will have all of the activities within the countries and its feature, and this will be representing the deficit of coverage, which is not considering the public sector, but it should include the public sector and the private sector, where we are currently developing lots of further activities. This is what I had to share with you. I thank you so much. Well, we thank you for your presentation, Wilson, and for following the time allocated. We will go now to the second presentation, and then at the end, after the third presentation, we will have the Q&A for all the colleagues. Voy a dar
From the Research Design and Evaluation Division in the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. She's going to make us a presentation regarding the business register in the statistical business register in Jamaica. Amanda, you have the floor for 15 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead, over to you. You're mute, Amanda.
Good morning. So should I go ahead?
Yes, please. So you have the voice for 15 minutes.
Okay, so good morning. I will be doing a presentation on the statistical business register in Jamaica. The structure of my presentation, I will be going through what is the statistical business register, the uses of the SBR, coverage and scope, SBR maintenance strategies, the strengthening of the SBR, as well as the main challenges and the solutions. So what is the statistical business register? So the SBR, it's a structured list of establishments operating in Jamaica. Establishments are assigned an activity code based on the Jamaica Industrial Classification, JIC. The JIC, it seeks to group and organize activities undertaken in the production of goods and services into a structured set of distinct categories. So the JIC is based on the ISIC, which is the International Standard Industrial Classification of all economic units. We updated it in 2016 based on the ISIC Rev 4. So it basically replicates the structure of the ISIC up to the 3-digit level, after which it starts reflecting our national economic realities. The uses of the SBR, the main use of the SBR is to serve as a sampling frame for our economic surveys. Other uses includes it serves as a data source for compiling demographic information about businesses. It's also used to consistently classify statistical reporting units. As far as the scope of the SBR, we cover all privately operated businesses in Jamaica employing one or more persons. The industry, it excludes the agriculture, hunting, and forestry industry. So the scope of the SBR is limited to non-farm entities. We capture both formal and informal businesses, and we have a large informal sector in Jamaica. So yes. So the information captured, we have the name of the business, we have business contact information, contact person information, the year of commencement, the type of organization, and by type of organization, we mean whether it's a single establishment, a branch of another establishment, head office, etc. We also capture employment details. We also have on the register the legal form of the establishment, if it's a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, etc. The type of ownership as well as the economic activity. As far as the SBR maintenance strategy, we identify business prospects, and we do this from the internet, newspaper, telephone directory, etc. We also have what is known as the CREW, which is our Central Register of Economic Units. We have a questionnaire that we administer to business prospects, as well as we use it to update existing businesses that are already on the register. We also use survey feedback. So we have other routine establishment surveys, and we also have administrative records that we use to help maintain the register. So the challenges with the current BR, statins, current SBR is limited in its coverage. So the proportion of businesses under current register is far less than the businesses known to exist in Jamaica. The linkage, it is unable to link with other divisional work programs such as national accounts. The IT infrastructure, the current SBR is housed in a DBase 2 relational database. It's integrated with SAS for conducting queries. And there is no support for updating the database to reflect changes such as out of business, etc. But there have been some solutions. We have found some solutions for some of these problems. So to overcome the shortcomings and to improve the current business register, the following steps were taken. We conducted a survey to improve coverage, which I will get into in the next slide or the next 2 slides. We ensure the inclusion of a unique ID variable where possible to allow for the linkage of SBR records with other divisional programs, and redesign the SBR to ensure efficient IT maintenance in-house. So as it relates to the strengthening of the SBR, we conducted the Jamaica survey of establishments in 2018. It was a large-scale survey of businesses operating in Jamaica. It provided baseline information on the number of establishments as well as the distribution of the economic units by various categories. So the JSC, it targeted establishments mainly operating in urban areas across the island. It was restricted to non-farm establishments because that is the coverage, the scope of the SBR. But it's targeted non-farm establishments operating from stationary, visible economic units employing 3 or more persons, including the owner on a continuous basis. However, professional services such as doctors, dentists, and legal offices were included regardless of the number of employees. So when we identify establishments employing fewer than 3 persons, we made note of it. We collected certain basic information such as the name, the address, the economic activity, but we did not administer a full questionnaire to those establishments. From the JSC, we found about more than 2 times the number of establishments that we had on the register. So when we went out into the field, from the data collected, we can see where we had more than 2 times the number of establishments coming in when you compare it to the existing business register. So as it relates to administrative data, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Tax Administration Jamaica, which is our revenue collecting agency. So we currently receive monthly, quarterly, and annual tax files from our tax department, and the files will be used to populate some fields of the SBR, particularly sales revenue, the revenue field. So as it relates to record linkage, we have 3 sources. We have the JSC records coming in from the JSC, we have the existing business register, and we have files from the TAG. So we conducted a record linkage exercise. So the plan is to initialize the SBR with the linked records, the records that are common among all sources, then with the unlinked records after further investigation. So we can investigate by sending our crew questionnaire to the establishment. We also did a top contributors analysis where we ensured that the top contributors to the economy were included on the SBR. We have been getting support from Statistics Canada through the project for the regional advancement of statistics in the Caribbean. They have developed a generic SBR for the Caribbean region. It is a SQL relational database with a user-friendly interface to facilitate browsing and updating of records. So the platform will be used to store this to strengthen the SBR. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for your excellent presentation and the advances that you let us know regarding first the structure, and second the following the use through the survey that you conduct in 2018. So now I'm going to give the voice to my colleague Diego Ferreira, which is going to make a presentation about the indicators of demography, business demography from Brazil, and he's coming from the coordination of registers and classifications at the IBGE in Brazil. Well, you have the voice. Are you going to speak in Spanish or in English?
Yeah, I'm going to speak in English.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate INER for the organization of the conference meeting. Also to thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to show some business demography indicators from Brazil. As you said, I'm Diego, manager of analysis. And before I take the floor, I'd like to say I'm here with my two colleagues from IBGE, Francisco Marta and Vinicius Mendonça. So Francisco and Vinicius, feel free to complement anytime or help me to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. Our agenda here is not to detail a specific aspect or each production step of business register, but share a little bit how we structure our data source, their coverage and population, as well as the statistical units used in our business demography. Also show a big picture of Brazilian business demography numbers and shed light on some indicators like active enterprise, entry and exit, survival of enterprise in local units, high growth enterprise, and finally share challenges that we have been facing on business registers. I'd like to start showing how IBGE's SBR is organized and it's maintained through main of data source, not only from administrative data source, but also from survey feedback and ongoing profiling activities. IBGE's SBR has around 30 million of enterprise, including the active and the inactive ones. Its maintenance is realized continuously, but the compilation frequency of main data source are annually. The administrative data comprise two main data sources that are all linked by a unique ID. We call it CNPJ. The first data is from Brazilian Taxation Office, which provides register at enterprise and local unity levels. It has, for instance, characteristics of industry and legal form and many others. Also, the data has the universe of all formal firms. However, it does not have any employee information. Another set of data is the annual report of social information, HISE, from Ministry of Labor. That is at enterprise and local unit levels, as well as at employee level, which allow us to identify for each salaried employee information like sex, education, its employment contract information, for example, if it's permanent or temporarily, also know working hours, month salary, the start and end date of the contract, and so on. A drawback of the data is that not all firms are obligated to fulfill this HISE questionnaire. despite I'm showing only 2 data sources, we actually use much more data source. For example, this year we have added to our enterprise statistics those data that from trade and goods by enterprise characteristics. However, they have not been incorporated yet into business demography. One more kind of data source is IBGE service applied to 4 sectors: retail trade, construction, service, and manufacturing. We also have a computer-assisted telephone interviewing, which seek mainly validate enterprise classifications of economic activity. And finally, we do profiling, developing roles to validate the information from administrative registers and surveys, also using alternative sources like open data and those that come from bilateral agreements. Or business demography use both statistical units, enterprise, that allow the production of statistics at national level, industry level, enterprise size based on number of employees. Only for the enterprise, we analyze some employee characteristics like sex and education, as well as informations of revenue and value added, costs, and so on. All variables that come from service and are used for high growth enterprise statistics. We also use local units for understanding at industry level and employee size, how the local units behave for all subnational levels. In Brazil, we have 27 state units and more than 5,500 cities. About the coverage, SBG is a subset of IBGE's Sbr. Both take into account all economic activity, all economic sectors covered by ISIC. In respect of legal form, SBD consider only profit institution and cooperative. Therefore, are excluded a public sector, non-profit institution, and international organizations. The IBGE's Sbr population includes all statistical units ever created. In 2008, there were 29.3 million of enterprise, but after excluding inactive enterprise and other legal forms, the population of active business demography was 4.4 million of enterprise. We must note that IBGE's SBD does not use any given employee threshold to limit enterprise population, like at least 2 employees or so on. IBGE's experience with SBD started in 2000 when National Classification of Economic Activity, KINAI, was still based on ISIC revision 3. In 2002, we had another revision, but in 2008, it had been implemented. The definition we have been using so far, KINAI were updated to version 2, and new roles for enterprise activity and demography events were implemented based on OECD 2007 and 2008 manuals. For this reason, some results that I'm going to present in the next slides consider this 2008 to 2018 timeframe. We don't have 2019 year yet, but it will be published soon on October. So, an overview for 2018 data, Brazil had 40.4 million of enterprise, with occupies 32.3 million of employees that received a total salary of 276 billion of US dollars. and on average represents $660 per month. Some characteristics of enterprise by employee size. 46% were non-employer enterprise, and only 0.3 were larger enterprise with more than 250 employees or more. By sector, almost 44% were in service and 41% in retail trading or wholesale, and the rest in manufacturing and construction. Considering the employment, those 0.3 of large enterprise employed almost 42 of all employees. By sector, service employed 41% of employees, and manufacture show its importance important role in labor market, employing almost 23%. Trade employed 27%, and construction almost 6%. Statistics by sex show that 39% were women, and by education, only 15% were graduates or had a higher level. Concerning entries and exits of enterprise, we show here the number of employer, the blue line, and no-employer enterprise, the orange line. In 2018, there were 570,000 entries of non-employer enterprise and 180,000 entries of employer enterprise. In the same year, 30,000 non-employer and 133,000 employer enterprise exits. Since 2008, the most relevant change has been the decrease of non-employer entries when they were 30,000 entries. When we look at the entry and exit rates by the same categories of enterprise, the behavior is pretty much the same. And I will go forward to save us time. Now, the survival rate up 5 years old of employer and non-employer enterprise that were born in 2013. After 1 year, almost 90% of the employer enterprise survived, and 64% of non-employer enterprise survived. When we take a look after 5 years, only approximately half of the employer enterprise survived, and for non-employers, it was less than 1/3. The same indicator, however, by sector, shows that the survival rate of 5 years old for construction is the least, with 34% of business enterprise, and the survival rate of the service sector is the highest, 58%. So the conclusion for employer is the employer enterprise is very similar. Now we present the survival rate of up 10 years old for business local units by Brazilian states. For those units were born in 2008. It's important here to note how heterogeneous the survival rate is according to the country's state. The difference between upper bound and lower bound was around 16% in 10 years old. and kept this way almost all years that we analyzed. Finalizing the indicators topic, we share some numbers of high growth enterprise, which we still define as an enterprise with average annualized growth greater than 20% per annum over a 3 years period, and it's measured by the number of employees. In 2018, Brazil had almost 23,000 of high growth enterprise that employed 2.9 million of people. Beside the reduction in the number of high growth enterprise along the years, we have not seen yet a strong reason to consider a 10% of threshold growth rate once 2,000 of enterprise is still a significant amount of enterprise. But but we know if we applied a 10% threshold growth rate, the number of high growth enterprise would increase around 3 times. Looking at the future, we see challenges that can become opportunities. We still face barriers to access administrative registers from other public institutions. For instance, from Brazilian tax office, basically because the tax secrecy law. However, we are working on a legal framework that will allow us to get access to more data source. Another challenge is no entrepreneur's characteristics. Once we have access from highs of only 2 employees administrative registers. Nevertheless, in 2018, we got access to a database with the enterprise shareholders. So we hope soon have more information and studies about that. Lastly, but not the end, because the list of challenges is much more than that, but another issue to us is to compiling indicators taking into account continuity rules. What means take into account enterprise structure changes, such as mergers, breakups, and so on. We invite all of you to visit our work that is available in BGS website, where you can find the ebook publication. Also, who wants to build your own data tabulation may access Sbr system. Thank you, everyone. And any questions, I will be here to answer.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Diego, and your team and your colleagues from the IBGE of Brazil. And thank you very much to all the 3 presenters, because we are on time, and we finish on time these 3 presentations, and now we are going to open the floor and for questions. Vamos a abrir la mesa a preguntas y respuestas.
So the Q&A session is now open for the 3 presenters, Wilson, Amanda, and Diego. Thank you once again, and we will await the questions we have for you. So, as I said, the floor is now open for any questions. I have a couple of questions myself so that we can get started with this Q&A. But first, I will give the floor to Libertad Trujillo from Ecuador. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. This is the first time that Ecuador, INEC, participates in the Wiesbaden workshops. I take away a lot of experiences and exchanges and ideas from other places. So thank you so much. And I do have a question for the presenters, especially for those in Latin America. In Ecuador, we have a company or enterprise directory, and we have the revenue per sales. And although we do have enterprise research units and establishments, we have some issues with the quality of economic activities in the units of these establishments, because for one unit, the internal revenue system has several activities that are of very low quality. So we'd like to jump ahead, and due to what I have been saying, our enterprise directory has a framework, but only at the enterprise level, but not establishment level. So we want to make this leap, and we have carried out basic researches. But my question is we could see that it's possible to send invoices or send electronic billing or electronic invoices in Ecuador. However, the unit that is in charge of this activity does not give us the database because they're very large. And up until now, we know that we have no standardized categorization for the products coming in. So my specific question is, what country from the region or perhaps another region has had similar experience with e-billing or electronic billing, and how has it gone? Thank you. Thank you so much. If it's okay with everyone, I will take another question so that the presenters can take 2 questions at a time. So I will ask now Valentin Llorente from Spain to take the floor and raise his question with us. Once you answer these first 2 questions, I'll ask Rico and Monica to raise their questions. Go ahead, Valentin. Good afternoon from Spain, so good morning in Mexico. I have really enjoyed all the presentations that I've seen from Costa Rica, Jamaica, and Brazil. So my question is for Diego specifically. I've seen that in the enterprise demography that you have presented, you talk about entries and exits of enterprises. In Europe, we talk about births and deaths, and there's a methodology that is established so that we could go from the entry concept to the birth concept and from the exit concept to the death concept. So I'd like to know from our Brazilian colleague, if you're talking about a demographic of administrative units or economic units. That is basically my question. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we'll take these 2 first questions, and then we'll have a second round of questions. So I don't know who would like to start. The microphone of Mr. Rolando is muted. Rolando, your microphone is muted. I apologize. So I was saying that we will cover these 2 first questions. So out of the 3 presenters, who would like to answer Libertad's question? Because we know that Diego will answer the second question as it was raised specifically for him. So who would like to answer first? Perhaps Costa Rica? Yes, thank you. To answer to your question, Libertad, when it comes to billing electronically, at the moment we are not using that method right now. It's not a database that we use for register establishment. And now if we could hear from Jamaica, please.
Yes, I would say the same. We have not explored anything related to electronic billing, but I think you had mentioned something about the issues with the quality of economic activity. I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but I had mentioned the Jamaica industrial classification. Our tax department also uses the classification. So when we get the data from them, it is on the register. On our questionnaires, it's also there. I'm not sure I understood the question, but I hope that answers it somewhat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So there's about the electronic, I forgot the name, but let me move to the other, the second question. Pasaremos, Diego, si quieres responder la pregunta de Valentín, por favor.
So, Diego, if you could answer to the second question.
Actually, nowadays, we do not use electronic registers from tax office, but we are working on that. We are working on a legal framework to get access to those informations. And especially to understand those enterprises that were actually active on the reference year. So the answer is we are trying to get access to this information, but nowadays we do not use in the business demography yet. Another, in respect, the second question, Valentin, thank you for asking. Besides, I have presented only the entry and exit events. Actually, in our publication, the entry we use the definition of OECD. So inside the entry, we have subdivisions that we can identify those enterprises that they are born and they are re-entrants. But just for simplification for this presentation, I picked up only those entrants and exits. But the definition we follow the OECD rules. And what about the economic enterprise and administrative? We actually, as I said, we do not use any threshold for population. We consider all enterprise, no matter how is your size. So we have views even for economic enterprise, as well as for non-employer enterprise.
Thank you. Thank you, Diego. Now I'm going to give the voice to Rico from the Netherlands, and then Monica. Rico, and we have a question direct to Amanda from Jamaica, which is in the chat, and I'm going to read it after the Monica. Rico, go ahead, please.
Yes, my question was a little bit similar as that from Valentin, because I saw a lot of familiar terminology in the presentation from Diego. So my question was is somehow also answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rico. Monica?
Thank you. My question is for Amanda. Thank you all for your presentation. It has been very interesting. I want you to ask about informal business, how you codify and update the information of these units that are informal. This is a big challenge for Colombia right now. We are considering to include this informal business in our SBR, but we are trying to clarify how to codify these units, how to maintain and update their information, because we don't have those units in our registers or in our surveys. So that's the question. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Monica. And I want to ask a second question, Amanda, which is was in the chat from Natalia Doronsova from Switzerland. She's asking to the second question. It was the same, and the first question: how many digits has your GIC have?
Okay, thank you for those questions. So the JIC it goes down to the 5-digit level. So it has 5 digits. It's very similar to the ISIC. Yes, as far as the informal businesses, it is still a challenge for us. But the JIC, the JSE, the Jamaica Survey of Establishment, when we went into the field, we collected information in urban EDs and all the visible economic units. By nature of some of the businesses' operations, they are considered to be informal. So we are still exploring different ways about how to basically keep the information updated. We have what is known as our crew survey, which is basically we select a sample of establishments from our register. So regardless of whether it is formal or informal, you would get some updated information. It's still an area that we're exploring. So yes, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Perdón, ¿tenemos alguna otra pregunta del auditorio, de nuestros colegas en el chat?
Do we have any more? If we have no more questions,
¿Alguna otra pregunta que quieran hacer?
if there is any other, Francisca Marta from Brazil made a compliment to the question made regarding the invoices, electronic invoices in Brazil. And what they have shared is we are carrying out a project with the Brazilian tax office and the national account area in order to optimize the use of this information. I do not know if we have any additional question, but it seems to me that the fact of being able to identify all of this information and to disaggregate it given the different types, this is the gender education level for the decision making and the public policies. I find this to be a meaningful advancement, and I certainly welcome this disaggregation because it's always very important to be able to identify all the characteristics and features of the workers within this sector. We've seen, for example, 38% has to do with women, then the remaining percentage for men. So these type of gender analysis are very important, and they are of great value. There is, well, I have no more questions then. So if there are no more questions, then I believe that having said this, we will conclude the presentations of the session today. Let me express my gratitude to Wilson Rodriguez and all of the team of INEC Costa Rica for his presentation. Quiero
the Research Design and Evaluation Division from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica for her great presentation. And congratulations to you, Amanda. And I want to thank our colleagues from the IBGE of Brazil, Diego Ferreira and his team, and all the coordination of registers and classifications team in the IBGE Brazil. Muchas gracias por su
Again,
participación.
I thank all of you for your participation. I believe that having said this, we are reaching the closure of this event. I would like to invite the virtual roundtable to my friend Arturo Blancas so we can jointly close this process. I would like to share that during the whole day, we have had a tour just to get to know the status of the current situation of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean regarding business records, their advances, and which are the projects that we are developing jointly in the framework of the session and in the area of the joint projects that the countries are carrying out, and also the document that we are preparing for the Statistical Conference of the Americas. Also, we were able to see developments of the maturity level in the statistical business records, in which we have invited also the countries. So here, let me thank Hans Herman, and the statistical team from the Netherlands for your presentation that was quite clear. And here we were able to identify also all of the information within this process. Let me also express our gratitude in this process to our colleague from UNICI. So in the mapping area, they were present with us, where we had Natalia Doronsova, who was always with us in this working team that was connecting all of this process. We also saw the current situation of the SBRs in Latin America and the Caribbean, coming from the responses given to the country progress report survey, how we have moved on in the creation and the maintenance of these administrative records, and also for enterprises to generate statistical information within this region. So this situation validated all the different sessions, such as the country status, lessons learned, and all of the projects that we're carrying out within Latin America and the Caribbean. I also would like to thank the countries that shared their experiences, their challenges and opportunities for improvement, such as a contribution to encourage other institutes within the region for them to implement and incorporate to this effort by generating statistics through the use of SBRs, that at the end of the story, they are just administrative records of the institutional businesses and institutional establishments. Let me highlight that in regards to how the statistical offices are collecting more administrative records for economic topics, for environmental areas, for social topics. Well, this is how we will be able to generate and improve the dimension of the phenomena that will be present in our countries, and we will tackle them in a better way. let me truly thank all of the colleagues that were present in the 27th Wiesbaden meeting regarding business records, for allowing us to have this regional meeting for Latin America and the Caribbean in order to have a discussion of the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean to understand their processes. And basically, let me thank my colleagues and former working colleagues from INEGI. Let me thank Gerardo, Hugo, Gerardo Durand, and all of you that have given us our support. Let me also appreciate our statistical division unit from Colombia. And I also would like to thank the colleagues that have helped us in the interpretation and the translation of the different presentations to English and to Spanish. And at least in these type of exercises, it becomes very complicated. So let me thank the support of the interpretation team for this function. With no further ado, let me give the floor to Arturo Blancas for his closing remarks for the conclusion of this 27th Wiesbaden Group meeting. And well, once again, I thank you on behalf of ECLAC and the Statistical Division for all the support given to us for this very interesting event and what has taken place basically on this 24th of September morning. I give now the floor to Arturo. Well, Rolando, thank you very much. And I thank you so much for leading today's sessions and for all the support that you have given us in order to be able to carry out together with your working team and to host this meeting. I think it has been very successful. We have been able to see how the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, we are doing a series of activities for the improvement of our administrative and business records. And also, as a result of this, our economic distribution and information, which is basic in order to measure the economic development of our countries. I also would like to thank all of the speakers, all of the presentations that were given today, the questions posted, because there's a lot of material in order to continue forward doing maybe another session. But well, this has to conclude in a given moment. And well, we leave here a lot of questions unanswered, and I'm sure many more ideas that we certainly may share. But nevertheless, the Wiesbaden group and the meetings where we meet every 2 years, uh, well, also the group of experts of the meetings of the OECD, UNESE, and Eurostat. Well, this is also a forum that we can certainly use in order to work along our work aligning the area in which we're involved. Let me thank everyone for assisting this type of sessions, of being a part of. I was making an account, and we reach actually 73. That is a very good number for attendance of this meeting, where we may have a smaller meeting for the Latin American and Caribbean region meeting. So I thank you all for your attendance. I also certainly would like to express my recognition to my working team, to Gerardo, Hugo, Liz, and the whole team of INEGI that truly were very dedicated to carry out this meeting. Now, yes, it is the very first meeting that we have had on the virtual system. Many of us are working from our home. And well, I believe that these type of meetings, as I was saying yesterday, will have to start being developing and evolving in order to continue with this type of situations, even after the pandemic is over, because it provides us with a great advantage of being able to bring together many countries and many people in order to work jointly and to be able to assist each other in the improvement of our statistical information. I certainly would like to thank, Rolando has done so, but I certainly would also like to thank, as I did yesterday, to the interpreters. We thank you so much for your wonderful job. I think that without this interpretation, many of us would not have been able to communicate in a broad way among ourselves in this type of fora. We, the interpreters, acknowledge your recognition very much, and we thank you for your comments. Well, we have remaining activities. We still have to carry out the report of the meeting and the different group activities and have a summary that will be submitted to your consideration in an independent format to the Commission of Statistical Commission within the United Nations that will take place next year during the first quarter. And with this in mind, we also will have to start selecting, let's see, which country could be of help in order to host the next Wiesbaden meeting. We still do not have yet the full selection, yet we are within the process. We will be sharing the information of where shall we meet in 2 years' time. And finally, let me invite you to continue participating in this type of meetings. I think it is really critical for all of the countries to be able to have a fora where we may share our problems and our different complicated situations that we face in generating a statistical business records that are basic. They are the core of the economic statistical information within our countries and the world. So let me invite you over and over again to meet in 2 years' time, that we shall also meet in the Luxembourg meeting of the 3 different organizations. And in 23, we will inform to you where and how will be the type of meeting in which we'll take part. But this is the best way for us to keep on working. We have had the opportunity of attending to several meetings of the Wiesbaden group, and we have always learned from each of the meetings. It is a very valuable collaboration that takes place within this group. It is truly a very united and interesting group. And well, many of you have been involved in this field for years and years and contributing with your knowledge and expertise. I thank all of you very much. And well, I wish you a happy weekend. Maybe some of you are already on Saturday, but I hope that those of you that are not yet on Saturday to have a good weekend. We thank you so much, and we shall meet again in the next meeting. Thank you very much, and good day to all of you. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
Hello, Rico. Hello. Bye-bye, Rico.